You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
the answer is zero.
Military vessels transit.
No. I didn't ask about military vessels. I
which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
For
how many commercial vessels?
Transit.
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have transited the Red Sea?
Would you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships?
The questions are not to me,
military
Mr. Secretary.
ships?
They're to you.
We have responsibly put military.
The answer is zero. I reclaim my time.
For months, frustration had been building quietly beneath the surface. Not through official statements or carefully managed briefings, but through small moments that carried a different kind of message. Photographs shared by service members. Complaints that sounded less like outrage and more like exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that settles in when people begin to feel ignored by the very leadership meant to represent them. At the same time, controversy seemed to follow nearly every public appearance. Questions about judgment. Questions about priorities. Questions about whether the weight of responsibility was being treated with the seriousness the position demanded. Critics pointed to repeated incidents that, taken together, created an image of instability rather than control. A missing military drone worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Public remarks that blurred the line between politics, religion, and performance. Comparisons and rhetoric that many believed did not belong inside institutions built on discipline, restraint, and trust. Even among those willing to defend him, there was a growing sense that the conversation was no longer only about policy or ideology. It had become something deeper, a question of credibility, of temperament, of whether leadership can survive once the people beneath it began expressing their frustration in silence, sarcasm, and quiet humiliation instead of confidence. By the time articles calling for impeachment had been introduced, the atmosphere surrounding him already felt fractured. Not because of one single event, but because each controversy seemed to leave behind another layer of doubt. Another moment people could not fully explain away. And yet, through all of it, the public appearances continued. Press conferences, deflections, attacks on critics, language that framed disagreement less as scrutiny and more as persecution. The tone grew increasingly combative, increasingly personal, as though accountability itself had become the enemy. That is what made the congressional hearing feel different. Because beneath the politics, beneath the headlines and the outrage, one question remained, a question asked not by a commentator or a political rival, but by a congressman who had served in the military himself. Someone who understood the culture where accountability is supposed to begin at the top. He asked him directly whether accountability applied to him. And for a brief moment, the room became very quiet. Not because people were waiting for a complicated answer, but because sometimes the clearest questions reveal the deepest fractures.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no.
It's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the command.
Okay, so everyone knows it's Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah. What was the classification marking?
Because again, classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not trying to say anything.
That's what I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time...
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
As I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? You've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about,
Mr. Secretary, does accountability apply to you or not?
Is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our ships.
I'm just asking if it applies to you.
Very successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
asking about
we
I reclaim my
put them
time.
in a place where they called for a ceasefire.
I reclaim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S. flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
the answer is zero.
Military vessels transit.
No. I didn't ask about military vessels. I asked
which would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
how many commercial vessels?
Transit.
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have transited
the
the Red
Sea? Well, would you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships?
The questions are not to me,
military
Mr. Secretary.
ships?
They're to you.
We have responsibly put military.
The answer is zero.
First.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number. But
you don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was the Army JAG fired? Why did you fire him?
They all serve at the pleasure of the president, and I think.
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just asking you why.
That we
and
need
you probably learned at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want better representation in each and every of those.
You can't explain why you fired any of them?
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
He serves at the pleasure of the president. That was the answer. Not a defense of the decisions that had been made. Not an acknowledgement of responsibility. Not even an attempt to explain where accountability begins when lives, institutions, and military trust are involved. Just a sentence.
Short, clean,
detached. And in that moment, the hearing seemed to stop being about policy altogether. It became about something far more unsettling. The idea that accountability itself had narrowed down to a single audience. Not Congress, not the public, not the service members carrying the consequences of those decisions across oceans and deployments. Only the approval of one man at the top. The exchange lingered because of what it implied, not because of how loudly it was said. When questions followed about the cost of the operation, the numbers only deepened the tension. Nearly $1 billion spent. Yet when asked how many American commercial ships had successfully moved through the Red Sea under that effort, the answer was painfully simple. None. No visible outcome. No measurable success the public could clearly point to. And still, the operation was described as a victory. That disconnect between official language and lived reality had already begun wearing down confidence long before the hearing ever took place. Reports of dismissed generals and admirals added another layer to the uncertainty. Senior military figures were moved without clear public explanations. Each time the question surfaced, the response remained almost identical. They served at the pleasure of the president. The same phrase repeated until it no longer sounded like an answer, but a shield against answering at all. Meanwhile, frustration inside the ranks appeared to be surfacing in quieter, more personal ways. Images shared complaints about food shortages aboard ships. Families describing care packages that never arrived. Small details, maybe, in the context of global military operations, but details that mattered deeply to the people living them every day. One mother reportedly spent thousands of dollars trying to send supplies to her son overseas, only for the packages never to reach him. Sailors spoke about rationing meals, about exhaustion, about conditions that left them feeling whether every claim could be fully verified or not. The emotional reality behind them was becoming impossible to ignore. And through all of it, the public posture never seemed to change. More press conferences, more combative rhetoric, more attacks aimed at journalists and critics, more moments where political loyalty appeared to eclipse the weight of military leadership itself. Public remarks blending religion, politics, and personal allegiance in ways that many believed crossed lines that once felt untouchable inside the Pentagon. The deeper concern was no longer simply whether mistakes had been made. It was whether the role itself had become performative, whether leadership had slowly turned into theater, measured less by outcomes and more by proximity to presidential approval. Because history has shown how quickly loyalty inside political systems can disappear once public pressure becomes inconvenient. The same figures elevated during moments of usefulness are often abandoned the moment they become liabilities. Quietly, efficiently, without hesitation. And that may be the most tragic part of all. Not the hearings, not the headlines, not even the collapsing approval numbers, but the possibility that somewhere beneath the speeches and the cameras, an entire institution is absorbing the psychological cost of leadership that no longer appears grounded in service, restraint, or responsibility. Only survival. By the end of the hearing, the atmosphere no longer felt angry. It felt exhausted. As though people were no longer trying to understand what was happening, only trying to understand how much further the damage could spread before someone finally acknowledged it out loud.